Welcome back. This is the fourth part of the series, Battleground. Please watch the previous parts of the series to enjoy this video. Jin had won the game of solo Russian roulette. He had not just pulled the trigger 3 times in a row, but 6 times in a row. He had won the game with extraordinary luck. He tossed the remaining 1 bullet to Jack and asked, "What do you think? Are you willing to come under me now?" Jack was shocked by Chin's move. He did not expect Chin to be crazier than him. He could not hide his smile. It was just what he had wanted. So, going with Chin was worthwhile. Chin was not surprised by his victory. He had already memorized the remaining bullets when he had fought with the gas mask guy. It was 7.62mm caliber bullet. It weighs 10 grams. Although it is light, but it is considerably heavy. When the trigger is pulled, the bullet moves. Based on his extensive experience of holding a gun, Chin was able to roughly estimate the location of the bullet through the center of the weight. If his calculations were slightly wrong, he would have been dead by now. After a while, Chin was given first aid kits. Jack was holding another one for him. As a doctor, Jack was pretty good with his hands. He said, "I did the first aid. You were very lucky that there were no damaged organs. All thanks to that bulletproof vest." Haben was surprised that she was treated by a serial killer. Jack pulled his knives and asked excitedly, "Now, what are we going to do? Are we going to kill that bulletproof guy from earlier?" Chin was not in a hurry. He said, "No, we avoid fights." He added, "This is too late to say, but I don't have any weapons. We also have no way of knowing when the magnetic field will narrow us down. What we urgently need is a transportation. So, let's go back to the boat." When they arrived at the bay, it was gone. The boat was nowhere to be seen. Haben looked at Chin and said, "What should we do?" But Chin was busy with something near a dead body. Jack asked, what was he doing? At the moment, Chin was looking over the corpses. He was looking for some loots. Jack was delighted by the idea of corpses. He jumped in excitement and ran towards Chin. He said, "Corpse farming. What a good idea. Isn't it just like treasure hunting?" Haben was momentarily speechless. She didn't know if these people were crazy or herself. Chin had got something. He had acquired 2 GPS radio devices. Those devices showed a detailed map of the island. Chin was delighted and was already on the upper clouds. With this item, he could quickly find out where Assemblyman Kim Namsu could be hiding. At the same time, Chin was surprised as he was looking at the sky. Haben too was looking at the same thing. It was an aeroplane. It was moving right above their island. Haben thought it was a civil aviation, but Chin immediately cut her between. He said, "There's no way they would come to a place like this. That's too far-fetched." Suddenly, they heard Jack say, "We can find out right now." Jack was holding a red pistol. He fired the gun at the sky and said, "I picked up something interesting." It was a flare gun. Jack had just fired a flare gun in the sky. Just when the flare was on its highest altitude, everyone present in the nearby vicinity could see it. They could see the flare as well as the plane. One of the lookers was the woman named Ling. She could tell by the flare that some players were going nuts. In the meantime, Chin was pulling Jack and shouting at him angrily, "Are you crazy? What are you doing announcing our location here? We don't have any proper guns with us." He couldn't get over this mess up. He asked, "What if the other guys gather up here?" Jack ultimately replied, "Then it's even better." Showing his tongue, he said, "The harder the game, the more fun it is." Chin couldn't believe how crazy Jack was. Haben called for Chin. She was pointing at something. Chin glanced towards the sky. Just as he had expected, that was not any ordinary airplane. The plane had dropped a big crate with a parachute at their location. This cart was descending slowly towards the ground. Chin realized the plane was a cargo plane for airdrops. After a moment, many people had gathered at the flare airdrop site. They could see a red smoke. They didn't know what it was. Suddenly, a man came forward and said, "Those are supplies. They are probably filled with food, weapons, medical supplies, and other things." The man was Kadri Gada from the Yakuza family of Wanaguchi. He immediately commanded them to go there. At that location, Chin was looking at the airdrop. He said, "There will be guys who came here after seeing that flare shot. They have no time to play around. So, let's hurry and bring what we need." Chin simultaneously pulled the cover of the crate. The crate was full of food, bulletproof vests, and fully loaded guns. There was a lot for each one of them. After equipping himself to the toe, Chin gave a satisfactory smile. He then tossed the gun towards Haben and told her to take it. He said, "You need at least one weapon to protect yourself." But Haben was hesitant. As she gave it back, she said, "She's fine. She can't use it anyway." But Chin looked at Jack and said in a low voice, "I'm not telling you to use it to fight the enemies. The gun was for that psycho, Danny Jack Daniel." Jack was a trash who enjoyed killing women. Although they have become a team, that guy is a pleasure killer by nature. Just seeing his criminal records, he was involved in kidnapping, murder, mutilation, and many unknowns. There were even rumors of sexual assaults. Haben was instantly stunned by the revelation. She couldn't help but remember her past. Chin continued and said, we can't predict what he's going to do next. I know, you are not used to using guns, but I think it would be better to prepare for the worst. Haben held the gun and silently shoved it near her waist. She held it perfectly. Looking at Chin, she said, all right. Chin was slightly surprised by her behavior. She had obediently accepted it. He couldn't help but wonder if she is getting used to killing people. Suddenly, they heard multiple gunshots. Haben and Chin panicked. Haben thought the gunshots were directed at them, but Chin contradicted her otherwise. He said, they're close to it. He looked outside to see the people and said, they're just across the streets. In the nearby trees, few men were lying dead. One of the killers said, the guys who are looking for the supplies are crawling out. Well, we will end up getting those supplies anyway. The man had a smile on his face. The other person had a same smile and said, we just ran out of water after our long run. What luck is this? However, the man in charge smiled. He was holding 2 long shotguns on him. He said, don't forget. Those supplies are just the bonus. The man in charge was Yakuza Kadri Gada. After a while, Chin heard footsteps approaching at their location. He immediately told them to get ready. Their enemies were coming soon. Team Chin was just behind the compound wall and waiting to ambush. But, at the moment, Chin heard the sound of engine roaring. As he looked past the wall, he saw a moving jeep towards the wall. The man threw something towards them. That thing was a stun grenade. The grenade exploded in a blinding light. Chin was stunned and couldn't see anything. He was mistaken it for ordinary grenade. He couldn't even react to it. He couldn't understand how many people were there in the vehicle. He was simply defenseless. After a moment, his vision slowly started to come back. He immediately told Haben to look into the bag. But, to his surprise, she was nowhere. Haben was gone, leaving behind the gun given by Chin himself. Chin was stunned. He couldn't imagine where she was. The jeep was moving at steady pace. In the back, Haben was kidnapped and tied up. As she opened her eyes, the kidnapper greeted her. I apologize for making you faint. We were running out of time before the effect of the stun grenade wears down. Haben couldn't understand where she was and how did she get here. But the kidnapper continued his speech. We were just trying to steal the supplies. Sorry about that. But, still, we didn't kill any of your teammates, so thank us. He smiled and added, well, killing men will only make me feel shitty anyways. He looked at Haben with a smile and said, by the way, you are really pretty. To think I would meet a girl like you in the place. But, as Haben looked at the person, she suddenly recognized him. 5 years ago. Prison for women. Little Haben was in her cell. A woman came to her and said, so, it's you, the girl who killed 7 rapists. I'm Han Jion, your cellmate. Let's get along. The woman had a gentle smile. She offered her hand for Haben as she said, I'm older than you, can I call you Haben? Haben was clearly not happy to meet her. She was little annoyed by Han Jion. But Jion didn't mind her expression. She said, look at your expression. What a waste of a pretty face. That was her first meeting. Jion was the first person Haben got to know in women's prison. After that incident, when she killed 7 people with her own hands and losing her family, she had lost every last will to leave. Meanwhile, Han Jion was like an elder sister to her, who approached her without hesitation. She made her feel safe. Into that miserable prison life, Jion became her family. One of the days in prison, Haben heard some prison mates talk about her, how Han Jion came to prison. According to the rumors, her ex-boyfriend was a vicious rapist. She was threatened and got arrested for taking part in his crimes. But, shockingly, even when her boyfriend got arrested, he was the first to get released this time. Hearing this, Haben was furious at this shit-wrapped judicial system. She couldn't believe how a criminal like that ex-boyfriend gets released rather than Han Jion. Haben couldn't help but look for that culprit. She wanted to know who it was and wanted to unmask that serial rapist. That person was death row inmate Oh Hyun-sik. The kidnapper was the same guy who she hated the most. Haben realized how that person got released so suddenly. It was because of this battleground. And now, the purpose of him kidnapping Haben was. Haben couldn't help but remember her struggle. Hyun-sik suddenly said, I'm telling you in advance, if you run, you die. Hyun-sik was not joking with his words. He was seriously looking forward to it. Haben was scared for her life. She felt that weight on her body. She knew she had to get out of this place by any means. She had to find a way. At the same time, she looked at her bag and remembered she had that item. At their base, Chin was freaked out as Haben had suddenly disappeared without any warning. He asked Jack, where did the girl go? Did she run along with their loot? Jack looked over and said, that's not it. Look at that. The trails of the car from earlier were right on the spot where the girl was. He guessed, after throwing the stun grenade, those people must have taken the girl in the bag. Still, Chin could hear the enemy footsteps from earlier. They were coming closer and closer. Chin and Jack were hiding behind the compound. The magnetic field was simultaneously closing in. He looked at Jack and said, "First, let's get out of here." Jack knowingly asked, "Where to?" Chin thought for a bit and said, "Well, it would be better to get further away from the magnetic field." But he was not sure about that. He suddenly said, "But our first priority is finding the girl." Just because he had put a bunch of supplies and meds inside the bag she was carrying. And without those supplies, it will be difficult to survive in the future. Jack gave a smile and said, "You punk, you say that, but have you fallen in love with her?" Chin didn't even look at Jack and replied, "Stop spouting bullshit and just follow me quietly." He added, "Let's follow their trails." But at the same time, Jack said, "I don't think we need to do that." Jack was holding the GPS tracker device and smiling at him. Chin recognized that item. He actually had that on him, but right now it was in Jack's hand. Chin angrily said, "My GPS radio. You bastard, when did you steal it?" But what Chin saw made him stop cursing. The GPS tracking device was showing 2 points, and currently the second one was in hands of Haben. She was glad that she had already connected the GPS device with Chin's device. She had to put the device in mute. She can't turn on the sound, otherwise she might get caught. But she can deliver information from here in real time. She was also successful in taking off the tape on her mouth, so at least she could get some air and talk. She needed to get as much information as possible from others. She asked her kidnapper, Hyunsik, what's his reason for not killing her? Where is he taking her? Hyunsik was quite surprised to hear her voice. He looked over and said, "Ayo, as expected. Did I put the tape a little too weakly? Well, we're almost here, so I don't care anyway." He stopped the car. It was a small village with little number of houses. Getting off the car, Haben thought he was the one occupying this village. Just when she was about to enter, Hyunsik stopped her. He stepped over a tiny wire which was attached to a hidden grenade. It was a trap. A grenade tied to wire which couldn't be noticed easily. Just like those in the army movies, these traps were installed everywhere around the entrance. Anyone who might enter this area would be dead if they don't know about the traps. She needed to tell them about the traps secretly over the radio. So she loudly asked, "Why did you set up traps in this kind of place?" But as she was about to finish her sentence, Hyunsik grabbed her mouth and sealed her mouth with the tape again. He noticed her intention and said, "Why don't you scream? You are just pretending to be obedient." He suddenly smacked her with an unmanly fashion. He had slapped her over her face. Haben was powerless and was knocked on the ground. The GPS device was also free to the display. Hyunsik saw the device. He grabbed Haben again and said, "So you were hiding this interesting thing, huh? You bitch." Haben was scared. Her eyes were struck with fear. Hyunsik glared at her eyes and furiously said, "Bitches like you are always on the lookout. Bitches who act seemingly obediently, but rotten on the inside. I went to jail because of one bitch like that." Hyunsik was talking about Han Jeon. He smiled and added, "But I have forgiven her now. Thanks to her, I have got to come to this place." He laughed like a maniac and said, "I really like it here. The freedom of killing, stealing, or doing anything." With open arms he said, "To be honest, isn't this normal? Why are they all called crimes? Whether it's murder or sex assault, shouldn't it be our rights as living beings?" Haben was listening to his blabbering patiently. Part of the reason was she couldn't talk. Hyunsik looked at her and smiled as he said, "I blabbered too much. It's a habit of mine, of becoming closer to the girl I'm gonna kill." Haben felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't even scream. After a few hours, inside a house, Hyunsik took off the tape on Haben's mouth. He grabbed on the backpack and said, "You may scream all you want here. It's been a long time, so I'm getting excited." He wore the gloves and added, "I have been hungry ever since I came to the prison. Once I win Battleground, I should get myself a cage." Haben was patient. She knew she needed to buy more time. She was holding something inside her mouth. She suddenly said, "Trash like you won't live up to the very end on this island." Hyunsik stopped his work, but Haben didn't stop. She continued and said, "The reason you secretly kidnapped me was because you weren't confident to win against my teammates, right?" Hyunsik didn't react to her, but Haben suddenly said, "What a cowardly bastard." This made Hyunsik angry. He glared as if someone had stepped on his tail. He laughed at Haben and said, "Don't you know your situation? Right now, your life depends on my mood. I told you to stop the submissive act." Hyunsik slapped lightly on Haben's face to show who was in charge. He said, "But is this the attitude of someone weak?" Just when his hand came near her mouth, Haben took a bite and pierced her teeth deep. Spray of blood, followed by Hyunsik's scream, rang in the room. Haben had taken a bite of Hyunsik's right hand. It was bleeding. He couldn't stop cursing at her. He was in pain. Haben asked, "Do you know?" Spitting his blood, she said, "I have killed 7 of your kind and became a death row inmate." Haben was stating facts. She had killed 7 rapists just like him, if not worse. She glared back at him and announced, "I'm not scared of a trash like you at all." Hyunsik was in pain as his hand was bleeding. He cursed at her and said he'll teach her some lessons. He picked up a wooden stick and said, as much as possible, I'll try to leave your body as whole. But first, I'll need to get rid of those limbs. So, you'll be quiet. Saying that, he launched on Haben. Before he could hit her, Haben jumped on his face. She struck her head on his nose. The force was so strong that Hyunsik lost his weapon and his balance. In that moment, Haben used that hidden knife and freed herself from the bindings. She jumped on Hyunsik with the knife, aiming on his eye. Hyunsik couldn't even react to it. He didn't even know when she had got that knife in her hand. But all that time when she was kidnapped, she had that one thing she had left as an insurance just in case. That one thing was the same knife Jack Daniel used to keep in his mouth. She thought she was crazy to keep it, but it had saved her life just now. After a moment, Hyunsik was searching for her and cursing. He had a mocktail bottle on fire. His right eye was ruined by Haben's attack, and she had left him as it is. She was hiding from him to gather her strength. Hyunsik shouted as he announced, "Just wait, when you're caught, I will burn every single corner of this place." Haben was not surprised to see him unfazed. She had also expected this to happen. She couldn't help but remember her loving big sister. She held the knife confidently. She was determined to take her revenge. Outside the small town, they have arrived. Chin and Jack had arrived at the town. Even after much time had passed, Hyunsik didn't even saw a trace of Haben. He shouted, "Stop hiding and come out, you bitch. You'll regret it if you don't come out right now." Haben, who heard it, tightened her grip. Suddenly a rock smashed on Hyunsik's face. She was aiming at her eyes so that he couldn't see her, but simultaneously she had just announced her location. Hyunsik was no fool to ignore that. She was ready for it. When he gets closer, she was ready to stab him. However, Hyunsik threw the mocktail bottle he was holding. The bottle exploded with a blast as it hit on the corner wall. Haben was surprised, as she hadn't expected him to throw it blindly. Her clothes had caught fire instantly. She had no time to wait, so she took off her jacket. Just when Hyunsik reached the spot, he only saw the fire and the burning jacket. The mocktail bottle was not enough to catch her. Haben was now hiding in the nearby building. She could hear him shouting threats over and over again. He was stuck on killing her. Haben was tired of running and hiding. She felt like her heart would burst. She was almost burned to death. She took out the knife and thought she couldn't do it anymore. She is too nervous. She thought she should have taken good care of that pistol Chin gave her. Right now, she couldn't even give up. She has to find a weapon to survive. She was inside a warehouse. She knew she could find something useful here. She had found some tools in the last warehouse she stayed. So, this should be not any different. She looked over shelves and boxes to find anything, and she had found it. She couldn't believe something like that could be found here. Just at that moment, the doors were slammed open by one leg. It belonged to Hyunsik. He was holding a crossbar and standing in front of Haben. He showed the crossbar to Haben and said he brought this present for her. He dashed on Haben shouting, "You are dead." In that instance, something grazed his cheeks like a bullet. Multiple shots were showered on him. Hyunsik was in shock. He didn't know there was something like a gun in the building. He would have found it before. Haben stopped shooting and said she had heard this thing was hard to control. However, this thing is not even a real gun. The weapon Haben was wielding was a nail gun called matcha. It was used for gas-type tools. When Haben was little, her father always scolded her for playing inside the factory. It was a very useful tool, but at the same time, it was as dangerous as hell. Haben started firing again on Hyunsik. Hyunsik dodged some of the nails and turned back. He jumped out of the window. Just when he got outside, he turned on his leg and threw the mocktail bottle. Looking at the falling bottle, Haben jumped out of the same window. The blast was massive. Still, Haben had managed to survive the blast. She could see her target right in front. She fired at him. Hyunsik tried to defend himself from the attack, but the shots didn't even touch him. Her aim was nowhere near him. He glared at her and said, "I'm not scared of you." He held his weapon and dashed again on her. Haben was shaking heavily from the recoil. She couldn't aim at him. She couldn't understand what to do. That's when she remembered Chin. How he did it. How he holds his gun to shoot. She realized she had to use both her hands. That's what she was missing for so long. Stability. The next shots were right on target. Hyunsik was holed with nails. He was screaming his lungs out. Haben had hit him. Hyunsik was in pain and crying out. She thought he couldn't move anymore. But, right then, Hyunsik gripped another mocktail bottle and aimed to throw on Haben. He cursed at her for being stupid. Haben was in shock, as she couldn't believe he could still move. She held her hands tight on the nail gun, and then Chin found the booby traps. They were wired and installed carefully all over the place. He understood that there was someone else in the town. They could be hiding around, so he needed to be careful. He couldn't help but think that Haben could be dead. Jack was not happy to hear that. Hyunsik was now covered in nails. He was bleeding from head to toe. Still, he was not going down. Haben was drenched in sweat just for hitting him over and over. She was bruised and tired. She held her weapon again to finish her business, but she stopped. Hyunsik was saying something. He said he is sorry. He did something wrong. He begged to spare his life. He was crying and trembling in fear. He knew he couldn't get another chance. He looked over Haben and said he'll never do anything stupid ever again. He'll do whatever she wants. Haben held her weapon and asked, "Really?" Hyunsik smiled and replied, "Yes, really." But inside his garbage brain, he was still thinking of killing her whenever she lets her guard down. But then, Haben pressed her finger on the trigger and shot on his thighs. Hyunsik couldn't even muster his strength to scream. He was in pain, much greater than anything in his life. Haben said, "You can't." She added, there was a nice person she knew, and she died because of him. That girl was her big sister, Unni. She was innocent. She got involved in that incident and got herself threatened. And in the end, she couldn't stand that guilt. Haben had seen her Unni take her own life. She knew the pain she had to suffer because of this one man called Hyunsik. And if he doesn't get that same situation, that would be unfair. Haben held the nail gun on his head. Hyunsik was scared for his life. He was trembling and crying for mercy. Chin and Jack had just arrived at the same location. When he was about to call Haben, Jack told him to hold on a minute. He knew something fun was going to happen, so they should just watch for a while. Jack had an amusing smile as he watched the scene unfold. He was curious about Haben, what kind of person she really was. After Unni's death, Haben had decided, if she gets out, she will take revenge for her, that such kind of criminals shouldn't be forgiven. But then, Haben saw the letter Unni left for her. The officer told her that she would be transferred, so she needs to pack her things and come out. For their reputation, the prison covered the case of Unni's death on her. So now, she was being transferred to the prison in North Jeonsang province. In the bus, she read the letter her big sister left her. A letter that said she has no other way to pay for her sins for what she did to the victims. The letter that said she is sorry for leaving her behind like this. And the letter which said she doesn't hate Hyunsik, who ruined her life, anymore. That's how kind she was. Haben couldn't hold her tears from falling. There was one more paragraph in that letter which said, Haben, you too. Don't waste your time to take revenge and just live your life like a human. You deserve that. Haben knew she couldn't live like a human anymore. Because of her death, she was going to live in a more scarier prison. That's what she had thought. But she didn't know the North Jeonsang province never even existed. Haben was holding the nail gun on Hyunsik's head. She just couldn't pull the trigger. She said, "You made someone really precious to me die. I will never let someone like you win and be released. If I think about Unni, I should kill you right here and right now." But Haben couldn't just neglect her big sister's last words. She pulled her gun back and said, "To a trash like you, I don't want to waste anything anymore. As I have given you enough pain, that is enough." Hyunsik couldn't even believe her words. He just listened silently. Haben added, "I will use the remaining bullets to survive in this place." She turned around and said, "If I see you once more, you will know what will happen, right?" Haben knew she couldn't just waste any more time on such a person. She just has to focus on surviving, just like her big sister wanted. She will live like a human. But it was not over yet. Hyunsik saw her walk away. He laughed and picked up his weapon. He dashed on Haben, cursing at her. She had her back on him. Chin knew this would happen, so he jumped to save her. Just in that moment, Haben turned and said with a smile, "Did you get that excited? You didn't even see what's under your feet." Just when he heard it, Hyunsik looked down to his feet. He had stepped on the wired grenade. He was the one who installed it in the first place. He realized this spot was the same spot he showed to her. The wire snapped and unpinned the grenade. Chin had already jumped on Haben to save. With a big boom, the blast took over the area. The mocktail bottle exploded within it. As the smoke cleared, Haben didn't even know what Chin was doing, jumping on her. Chin cleared her thoughts, saying, if she had just stood there, the fragments would have killed her. Guessing the sentiments, Haben thanked him. Chin looked over and saw the blasted body parts and the remains of Hyunsik. He said he had heard a couple of stories about his notorious actions. He had never expected to see the trash from their country here. He looked at Haben and asked, is he someone she knew? Haben gave a surprised look, so Chin added, he heard a while ago that he killed someone precious to her. But Haben was still staring at him. Chin asked if she is okay. Haben blushed and said, I'm okay. She couldn't help but think why Chin was worried about her like this. Jack Daniel was trying to process what had just happened in front of him. He knew Haben was different from the others. He licked his lips and looked at Haben. He was impressed by her and said, it will be fun to play with her like a toy. Chin looked at Jack and said, we can't stay here for long. The person he is searching for isn't here at this place, so they should decide their next destination. But at the same time, a bullet struck him with a powerful impact. He was saved by his bulletproof vest. The shooter was Yakuza from the Wanaguchi family, Kadri Gada. Chin and his team immediately took cover from the bullets. Haben asked Chin worriedly if he is okay. Chin was fine. He looked over the mark left by the bullet. It was indeed the bulletproof vest from the supplies. The bullet couldn't even get through it. The team members of Yakuza were still firing on them with no rest. Haben had seen some of them. She said, "Those people, aren't those the same people they saw when taking supplies?" Chin said, he is not sure. He doesn't think they followed him. They might have followed the car. Still, they were firing without rest. There was no way out for them. Suddenly, Haben came up with an idea. She said, "That's it. There is a way to get out." The Yakuza team members knew they had half won the battle. They were grinning their teeth as they have cornered their prey. Suddenly, Kadri saw it. A military jeep was moving out of the gates. It took a sharp turn and was moving at high speed. Kadri was stunned as their target was escaping. He had not expected them to get away with a vehicle. Still, he was not finished yet. He was not going to let them escape. He started firing. The bullets were chasing the vehicle. Chin told Haben to step on the pedal stronger. Haben replied, this was her first time driving a military vehicle, so this is the best she can do. As both of them were anxiously trying to stay calm, Jack was just enjoying the comfortable ride. But he didn't know this comfort was not for long. After a while, Chin saw that they have come a long way. He said they are getting far from them. At this distance, they should be out of their range. He looked at Haben and said, "Good job, woman. You have finally done something useful this time." Haben didn't know what to say. She suddenly said, "Haben Park." Jack was surprised. She added, "Calling me just by saying woman, I don't like it. Just call me Haben Park." Chin was happy to see her trust him, so he smiled and said, "Okay, Haben Park." Haben was glad too. As they were moving ahead, Haben asked, "Where is their next destination?" She has been driving randomly for now. Chin looked on the map and thought if they had got far from the dockside. He had guessed that Congressman Kim Namsu would be hiding somewhere near this area. He saw a place called Pachinki. It looked like a huge village, so he thought it must be easy to hide there and they might get many supplies there. He came to a decision. He said, "Our next destination is," but he was cut off by a voice that said, "Shelter." It came from the back. The brown cloth flew over and a person holding a gun came out. Haben, Jack and Chin were shocked simultaneously. It was a red-haired woman with an eye patch. She was holding her gun over Chin. She continued, "You have to take me to shelter. That is, if you don't want to die." The situation was tense as it is, but Jack looked at her and said, "I know that woman. She is famous among the drug criminals as Drug Queen, Dokbium Ling." As she heard it, Ling was little surprised as Jack knew her full name and who she was. She said, "I guess I'm quite a bit famous." She was there at the town incident. She was also being chased by some other guys. She knew that they would escape using the car, so she just sneaked into it. She looked at the GPS device and said, "Can you see the shelter in the GPS? Take me there. If you give me a ride, I won't kill you." Chin laughed at her and said, "You are being funny. If you are trying to threaten us with my life, you chose the wrong team." Jack had already jumped with his knife on Ling. Ling was momentarily stunned by his surprise attack, but she was not easy as she looked. She said, "Well, the lives of the allies must not matter much." Jack swung his knife, but Ling had dodged it unbelievably. She had thrown herself back and also caught Jack's hand in her clutches. Jack was holding his knife but not controlling it. Ling suddenly jerked his hand on side. Chin barely managed to save himself from the knife. He immediately took out his gun. Jack was ready with his mouth knives. As both of them were ready to strike, Ling was already holding 2 big guns on each of them. 3 of them had their weapons out. Chin was ready to fire. Jack was waiting for his strike. Ling was licking her lips and Haben didn't even know what was going on. Their vehicle moving on in the open area, waiting to be targeted. And they did. Heavy rain of bullets showered again on them. It was an ambush. 3 of the ambushers were firing on the open vehicle. Haben tried to turn and take on a new route. That turn had given a jerk for the passengers on back. Ling was immobile for an instant. This was their chance and Chin knew it better. He pushed on over Ling to throw her off the vehicle. But Ling had held onto it with one of her hands. She had to abandon both of her weapons just to stay on board. However, Chin was already aiming his gun on her. She held on Chin's arms and tried to talk out. She said, "We don't have to be like this. We can talk." Ling was clearly in jeopardy, the fear of death lingering on her. At the same time, the car's tire got on a stone and sent another jerk back. This time, the passengers were lifted up. The law of inertia took in, and both Chin and Ling were now falling out of the vehicle. The car was in full speed and it was already moving ahead, leaving both of them behind. Haben shouted for Chin in panic, but Chin was not in a situation where he could do anything. Just like that, he tumbled over multiple times from the fall. He was now on the ground. Haben was in panic. She shouted to see if he was all right. She told him she will turn back the car. But at the same time Jack got worried. He held on the steering and told her to step on the pedal. Haben was not sure about that. They were still being aimed by those bullets. They had to get away. Jack looked back and said, "Those bastards don't know how to save bullets, so I think we can't head back right now." Haben tried to complain about helping Chin, but Jack simply replied, "She is the one driving, so it's her choice. But if they turn back now, they will be the target." Haben knew they were still in range. She couldn't do it. She just accelerated. Jack was impressed by her choices. They had gone past their range of fire. One of the ambushers was clearly disappointed as he cursed and said, "We missed them." One of his subordinates, a woman, said, "That's why I told you. It won't be easy to get a car in motion." The third mate called them over. He saw Ling and Chen lying on the ground. He said, "I think they fell down from the car a while ago." The other laughed and said, "Maybe they died after getting shot, so they just threw them away." They made their plans to search them and get whatever they can from their bodies. But Chin was still conscious. His body wasn't moving. Suddenly, the ambusher saw him moving. He said, "I think this one is still alive." He held his gun on him and said, "In such a situation we should kill them twice to make sure." At the same time, they heard something. It was the sound of engines. More vehicles were coming. A buggy and a bike was on their way. It was the Yakuza team. Chin knew who they were. The ambushers started shooting at the surprise visitors, but they were getting closer. The main one shouted to focus on the driver and shoot. But the driver of the buggy was not any easy target. He was an expert. He immediately turned the buggy 180 degrees and came out to the back. To their surprise, he was now sitting on the back seat. Gada fired his gun and killed all of the 3 ambushers, bullets pouring down like hellfire. He didn't even show any ounce of mercy. Looking at the corpses nearby, Ling was now awake, but not safe. A gun was pointing right on her head. She knew who it was, as she said, "This damn Yakuza is so fucking persistent." Gada was not going to entertain her. Nearby, Chin was still lying down. He realized he was not their target. He doesn't care what they have in between them, so he just needs to play dead, not make any noise. But, as his fate had wanted, his GPS device started beeping. The sound took everyone's attention on him. Chin couldn't even imagine this scene. He couldn't believe it. Why was Haben Park contacting him now, of all times? But it was a man's voice. It said, "It's me, Hoyong. I'm Namsu Kim." Chin had finally found the person he had been looking for all this time. Assemblyman Kim was still alive. Will he be able to find him? But first, how will he survive from the Yakuza and his subordinates? Will he still be alive to meet him? Let's see in the next part of the series of Battleground. The link of the next part will be updated in the description. Join the fun. If you are someone who loves reading manhwa and animes, subscribe now and join us in our journey. Also, get notified for new manhwa updates and hidden gems. Thank you for watching this video and see you again.